Your life began long before your first memory. Before you knew your own name, you had already recognized familiar faces, reacted to voices, tasted new foods, learned to crawl, and taken your first steps. Those moments happened to you, but when you search your mind for them, there is almost nothing there. No clear image of your first bedroom, no memory of the first person who made you laugh, not even a single second from the day you were born. It feels as though the first chapter of your life was completely erased. But your baby brain was not empty, and it was not incapable of remembering. The real explanation is much more interesting. Psychologists call this blank period infantile amnesia. Most adults remember very little from before the age of 3, and memories from the following few years are often incomplete, uncertain, or mixed with stories told by other people. You may believe you remember standing inside your childhood home, but are you remembering the actual moment, or are you remembering a photograph you have seen many times? That is what makes early memory so difficult to understand. The experience may have been real, but the memory you carry today may have been rebuilt much later. And yet babies are capable of learning and remembering. They simply remember differently. In one famous type of experiment, researchers connected a baby's leg to a mobile hanging above a crib. When the baby kicked, the mobile moved. After a short time, the baby learned the connection. Days later, when the same setup appeared again, the baby immediately began kicking. That reaction showed that the baby had stored information and successfully retrieved it. Older babies could remember the connection for even longer, so the mystery is not whether babies create memories. They do. The mystery is why those memories become almost impossible to access later in life. Part of the answer is that not every kind of memory works in the same way. Your brain can remember a skill without giving you a clear story about learning it. You know how to walk, but you cannot replay the exact afternoon when walking finally made sense. You may react emotionally to a familiar voice without remembering the first time you heard it. These are different from autobiographical memories, the detailed mental scenes in which you remember yourself participating in a particular event. Babies can learn patterns, recognize people, and develop emotional associations. What they struggle to preserve is the kind of organized personal episode that adults can later replay like a scene from a movie. And that is partly because the machinery responsible for those memories is still being assembled. Deep inside the brain is a structure called the hippocampus. It helps connect the details of an experience, where you were, what happened, who was present, and how the events fit together. In an adult brain, the hippocampus works with other regions to organize an experience and make it available for later retrieval. But during infancy, those connections are still developing. Imagine trying to save important files while the computer's storage system is still being installed. Information can enter the system, but it may not be organized in a form that remains accessible years later. The young brain is not a smaller version of the adult brain. It is a rapidly changing construction site, and the speed of that construction may itself contribute to forgetting. During early life, the hippocampus produces and integrates large numbers of new neurons. This process helps create the networks that will support learning for the rest of your life. But inserting new cells into an existing network can also rearrange the connections already present. Think of it like renovating a house while someone is still living inside it. New rooms are added, old walls are moved, and hallways change direction. The house becomes larger and more useful, but the original floor plan becomes difficult to recognize. Research involving young animals suggests that faster neuron growth can make older memories harder to retrieve, while reducing that growth can sometimes allow early memories to remain available longer. This does not mean every baby memory is simply deleted, but it suggests that the enormous amount of brain development taking place during childhood may make those early memory patterns unstable. Your brain was not forgetting because it was doing nothing. It may have been forgetting because it was changing so quickly. There is another problem. To create an autobiographical memory, your brain needs more than sights and sounds. It needs a clear idea of who the experience happened to. In other words, the memory needs a main character, you. Young babies experience hunger, warmth, fear, comfort, and curiosity, but their sense of themselves as a separate individual is still developing. One clue appears in the mirror recognition test. A small mark is placed on a child's face before the child looks into a mirror. Very young children may react to the reflection as though they are looking at someone else. Later, they begin touching the mark on their own face. They understand that the person in the mirror is them. This developing sense of self gives experiences an anchor. Instead of simply experiencing something, the child can begin understanding. This happened to me. Then comes language. Before you had words, your world was filled with sensations. A warm hand, a bright window, a familiar melody, and the feeling of being carried. Those experiences were real, but they were not yet organized into sentences or stories. Language gives memory structure. When a parent asks, "Do you remember the dog we saw at the park?" the child begins arranging the event into a sequence. There was a park. There was a dog. I was there. Something happened. The more children speak about past events, the more practice they receive turning experience into a story that can be retrieved later. Without that structure, an early experience may remain more like a feeling than a scene, present for a moment, but difficult to describe and even harder to revisit years later. This may help explain why the age of people's earliest memories differs across families and cultures. Some parents frequently ask children to describe their experiences, emotions, and personal reactions. Others focus less on individual storytelling. Children who regularly participate in detailed conversations about past events often begin forming accessible autobiographical memories earlier. So memory is not created by the brain alone. It is also shaped by the conversations, stories, and people surrounding the child. Your earliest memories were built socially as well as biologically. So why can't you remember being a baby? There is no single cause. Your memory system was still developing, your brain was rapidly rebuilding its own networks. Your sense of self had not fully formed, and you did not yet have language to organize experience into a lasting personal story. But those early years were not empty. You learned who felt safe. You recognized voices. You developed preferences, reactions, and expectations. You may not remember those experiences as stories, but they still helped build the person you became. The blank space before your first memory is not where your life was missing. It is where your brain was constructing the machinery that would eventually allow you to remember having a life at all. It was the moment your brain began learning how to tell the story of you.